Okay, good day everyone. So today we'll continue from where we stopped because last time I treated the definition of canon and canonization and the process or criteria for that canonization. So now we'll be moving on to the applications of canon in the Old Testament, and also we'll also look back on what we did on the criteria for the Old Testament canonization. So starting with the word canon. Remember, in our last class, I defined what canonization is and the scriptural authority and the purpose of this canon. So, in order to recap, I said canon. The word canon means rule, or it's gotten from the Greek word canon, which is spelled Kanon, and it means a rule or standard or an instrument of measurements. So we have scriptural authority for this canon, and it refers to the books officially accepted as scriptures. And for the purpose of this canon, it is spiritual and doctrinal guide for God's people, that is for Christians today. So now moving on to the applications of canon in the Old Testament. First off, we have different applications of canon in the Old Testament. We have the religious application, we have the cultural and historical application, we have the personal and spiritual applications also. Now, in order to break them into these categories, we have the worship guidance, as you can see on your screen. This one falls under the religious application. Then we have the moral living, which falls under the personal and spiritual application. Then we have the identity, which falls under the cultural and historical application. So basically, the religious application in essence is comprising of the scriptural authority, whereby the Old Testament serves as a foundation for Jewish and Christian scriptures, which provides teachings, laws, and prophecies. It also has the worship and liturgy, whereby the Old Testament passages are used in Jewish synagogues and Christian churches today. And also we have the theological education also under the religious applications of the canon in the Old Testament. Now the theological education studies theological institutions in order to understand God's relationship with humanity and messianic expectations. Now, moving on to the cultural and historical application, where we have the identity, that is the foundation for Jewish teachings and culture. Under this aspect, we have the historical insight, where the Old Testament provides valuable historical information about ancient Israel, its culture, and the surrounding nations. Then we also have the literary influence, whereby the Old Testament narratives, the poetry in the Old Testament, and the wisdom literature have shaped Western literature today and has continued to inspire artistic expression. Also, in addition to that, we have the cultural heritage, where the Old Testament has influenced Jewish and Christian traditions, including the ethics and values in shaping Western cultural identity. Then moving on to the personal and spiritual application, where we have the moral living. Under that, we have the Ten Commandments that was established as a guideline for ethics. So under this one, we have the spiritual guidance, where the Old Testament offers spiritual guidance, wisdom, and moral teachings in order to help individuals understand God's character and purposes. In addition to that, we have also the devotional reading, whereby the Old Testament passages are used in personal devotions or personal worship, such as prayer and meditation, in order to foster spiritual growth and reflection. Then we also have the Messianic prophecies, whereby the Old Testament contains prophecies about Jesus Christ, which are seen as fulfilled in the New Testament, which also provides a deeper understanding of God's plan of salvation. Now, the Old Testament canon remains a vital source of spiritual guidance, historical insight, and cultural heritage in order to inspire and inform people worldwide. So let's move on to why was the canon needed. The canon was needed for preservation, it was needed for consistency and also protection. Preservation in the sense that it needed evidence such as authentic teachings of Yahweh, and for consistency it's needed because it has to arrange the doctrine across generations, and for protection it's needed to resist false teachings by all these antichrist or false prophets, and also to enable cultural shifts. Now, what are the criteria for this canonization? I remember that I spoke about this in our last class, where mentioned the criteria for the Old Testament canonization, such as the prophetic authorship, which were written by inspired leaders or the apostles at that time. Then we also have the scriptural harmony, which were consistent with existing teachings. Then we have community acceptance, which religious groups or religious community are used, or the book is used widely by these religious communities. Then we have the spiritual impact or evidence, whereby there's divine inspiration in this canonization process. So let's have a quick recap on what we just discussed. Now we talked about the purpose, significance, and process of the canonization. Now, for the purpose of this canonization, the purpose is to guide faith, doctrine, and practices. While the significance is to anchor spiritual identity, and the process whereby the canonization flows, there are several processes or criteria that was used in um considering these Old Testament books. Okay, so I think I'm done for today. See you in the next class. Thank you.